Hi, everyone. My name is Rigo, and we have Ankur here as well. We are from the HCDE Alumni Board, and thank you for joining everyone, or thank you for joining us for this very special lunchtime conversation with HCDE alumni Josh LAMAR. While we let people come in and join the meeting, let me tell you a little bit about what ALB is. ALB is a group of alumni who is trying to foster community in HCDE beyond graduation, and that comes in many forms. That comes in the form of events like this one. It comes in the form of publishing. Follow our Medium account, link to follow, and many other ways. We are constantly trying to reach out to alumni and to the HCD community so that we can continue growing our network, growing our connections, and keeping that HCD family together. This is a good opportunity to learn from each other and see what other alumni are up to and see how we can leverage each other's networks and knowledge to move forward with our career. For today's conversation, if you have any specific questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. There's also closed captioning available. You should be able to turn it on in the bottom bar in your Zoom. Josh will be going through his presentation. We'll save most of the questions at the end. And we'll just get started fairly soon. All right, well, Josh, I'll let you take over. Feel free to, talk a little bit longer before you start sharing, introduce yourself, and it's all yours. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you so much for having me, and thanks to everyone for introducing yourselves in the chat. I'm gonna kind of keep glancing around at that. Yes, I used to work with Dominic forever ago, and we were on the board of the Puget Sound SIGCHI back in what was it, 2003 or 4 to 2008-ish, somewhere around there. And I worked with Brandy as well. Nice to have some friends here. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. There we go. Hopefully y'all can see this. So the impetus for this particular talk actually came about a year ago. I put this talk together as everything was happening and COVID was starting, and we're like, whoa, what's going on? And how, remote research. And then for a lot of us in the research community, remote research was just a thing that we've already been doing several years before. And it became the thing that we now are doing. And the interesting part about remote research is that I'm coming from a perspective of this is a thing we should continue to do even outside of COVID. It's not that suddenly we have to do everything in a new way. We're just going to continue using the best of what we can do with remote research and move forward with what is working. And after we get back to normal times, getting back to the in-person stuff, which is also great fun. So I've redone this whole presentation from what I presented a year ago, and I'm also going to be talking about how my life and research has changed over the past year as well. So I'll briefly talk about me. We're going to talk about what remote research is, some myths about remote research. In general, how do we collect good data? And then what are some of the advantages of using remote research? As we're going throughout the session, if you have questions, go ahead and put them in the Q&A. And during a couple times, I might stop and ask if there are any questions. When I ask for a specific question, I'll give you a moment to look at the chat because I have to look at too many places at once, and you know how Zoom fun is. So I grew up in California. I lived in Seattle for about 20 years, where I went through the HCDE program. Before it was called HCDE, it was actually called Technical Communication at the time. I graduated in 2006, and I also studied music and poetry as well. I've been doing, this is my 17th year of working in UX, and 12 of those were at Microsoft. I specialized in a lot of mobile and tablet research, content consumption research, productivity research, and communication research. I was the research manager for Outlook for a while as well. I then took a sabbatical almost exactly 2 years ago and decided to move to France to be crazy and do something interesting and different with my life because it's fun. And then started my research company, Authentic UX, in August of 2019. We had just completed our first few projects in person, doing lots of in-person research, a lot of in-person ethnographic studies, as well as looking at lab studies as well. And then of course, COVID hit, and like everybody else, we moved to doing everything online, which was less of a shift for us since we've been doing it in the past already. But we've learned a lot about how and what remote research can be used for in the past year. So now I want you to, in the chat, not the Q&A, I would just tell me, like, are you a researcher? Are you a PM? You a designer? Are you an engineer? Like, where are you coming from? And what's your expertise level with remote research? I'm going to see if I can even see the chat right now, because I can't. Oop. There we go. I have no mouse. That's always fun. So y'all can see. I really want to promote the interactive aspects of these, because this is community building, and I am alone here. There we go. Designer beginner, researcher intermediate. Great. This is super helpful. Ooh, Atlas. That's Dominic. Awesome. Thanks so much for all the intro, y'all. Now I'm going to try to close this without having any kind of mouse. Oop. Just give me a moment. This is really fun. Has anyone else experienced this this really fun bug where you have no mouse? There we go. We're going to come back to this now. Let's talk about remote research. So when I'm talking about remote research, I am talking about research that is conducted remotely, that is online, which is location displaced, as opposed to in person, which is in the same location. Research can happen live in real time, like right now we are live and in real time, which I'm going to call synchronous, or it can be time displaced, which is asynchronous. So if you're watching this video later on, then you're watching it asynchronously. Remote research can be moderated by a human or moderated by a tool. We'll call that moderated and unmoderated. And it can involve one-to-one interactions or one-to-many interactions. And so in that case, it could be, if I'm doing a in-depth interview, it's one person, a researcher, me, talking to one other person, but it also could be one researcher, me, talking to a group of people, like in a focus group. So you can do remote focus groups as well. And remote research can be used for any kind of conventional research method, aka any kind of in-person lab studies. Just about, but I'll get to that. And then you can have video only or video plus screen sharing. So there's this aspect of just having the conversation, or you can also have a screen share where you show and do, like I am sharing my screen, which is not working. And you can see what I'm doing on it, or lack of being able to do because my mouse disappeared. So that's always fun. So I create frameworks, and everyone in my company actually laughs at me because I create a 2x2 for everything, but it's because I have to make sense of my ideas in ways that break things out. So I've broken out synchronous to asynchronous and in-person to location displaced research. So on the left side, we'll have what we could call in-person or traditional conventional research, where you are doing something in a lab or in someone's home, which is live, real-time synchronous. Or you can actually be watching a video of a session that happened at a previous time. That could have been yesterday, or it could have been a year ago. But if you're watching a video of research that happened before, that's time displaced in-person research because the people are co-locating in the same location. On the right side, we have this location displaced or remote online research. And I'm going to be using some of these remote and online terms synonymously. So hopefully it'll all make sense. But essentially we have live streaming, and that's where what we're doing now, we are live. I am streaming my computer, and you can actually have some nuance there. You can have the researcher and the participant in the same room, but the team is watching it remotely. Or you could have the researcher, participant, and team all in different locations, which is pretty much the standard for a lot of research that's happening right now. And then the other piece of it is unmoderated research. That could be an unmoderated usability study. That could be an unmoderated diary study where the participants log in at any time that they want. So it's time displaced, and then complete the tasks as they go. So this is the framework with which I'm thinking about and how I apply remote research to the whatever research goal it is that we're talking about. I'll have this in the deck. You all can see that later, and I'll give you a link where you can get you access to this deck later on as well. But essentially breaking this out into who it's conducted by, where the location is, how it's consumed. So let's talk about some disadvantages. And I wanted to start with this one because I feel like we learned a lot in the past year about what the possibilities for research can be and what that means that we should do differently. So remote research can't really replace being there. And I think that this is really the biggest thing. It's not a replacement for in-person ethnography. And if you've ever done in-person ethnography, you know how important it is to really be there. There's that physical feeling and sense of being there, but there's also the sense that you get of being there with other people. And that rapport that you develop in person can't really be replaced in the same way. So that's still true. It doesn't really replace it. We try to get at some of the same research questions in similar ways, but it's really hard because you can't actually be there. And the fun part about the screen, and I'm going to try a new thing here. When you see a screen, you're getting this much of me, like here up, and then you get like a little bit of my background if I haven't blurred it. I didn't blur it because there's nothing really that interesting. I have a painting back there. But you don't really get to see the context of the room. And so one of the things that we like to do when we're doing research is to actually have people move the camera around, like when it makes sense, right? Like you can see, like I'm in Paris, and it's nighttime, so you can actually see the nighttime. So you get a little bit more of the context of what's going on. And that's the thing that's really, really hard to replicate. Long sessions are harder, and it's really hard to be on your computer for the whole time. This is even more a thing now. Like Zoom fatigue is a thing. And everything after the little caret there is like my revision of what I thought a year ago. 60 minutes new norm for Zoom meetings, right? Or for research. We've done some 90-minute sessions, but 2-hour Zoom calls, almost unheard of. And you really have to give a lot of extra space when that's happening. Like if we're all on a Zoom call all day, every day, fatigue sets in. And that is true for doing research as well. New technology and tools can be hard to learn. 2021 update, we've collectively learned a lot about things. We've learned a lot about how to work from home because we've had to. We've learned a lot about how to use Zoom and other remote online communication devices and tools. Like we've had to all collectively learn how to do that. And so that's actually something that it can be hard, but we're learning a lot more. And we're actually also pushing all of these tools to their limit as well. Internet speed and online collaboration tools is an interesting piece of this because this is actually slightly more of a problem now that everyone is at home. And that's especially in the developing world. So if you're doing research, we do a lot of research in Brazil and India. And whenever we're doing research there, it's more of a problem if everybody is in the same location, and especially when you have shared devices. If you have a shared laptop with someone else or the other members of your family in your home, then you have to negotiate that usage during certain times. So, and that affects internet speed and bandwidth on top of everything else. So we have had to learn how to be creative in terms of conducting research in the developing world as more and more people are online and at home at the same time. Participant pools are an interesting thing, and I think that it depends on if you're looking at a platform where you pay to use their panelists on their platform versus if you're recruiting through other traditional means. In the past, doing a lot of online research, the participant pools tended to skew a little bit younger and more tech savvy, more towards professional research participants. I think this is less true now. And it's because when we're doing research, we often bring people onto some of these new platforms. And so it's actually growing the audience of what's possible, but it depends on the tool. And it also depends on the way that you recruit. Then the last disadvantage of remote research is that international research can be difficult if you haven't been to the country before or don't know the language. This is still true, but language is not a barrier in terms of how we conduct research. There are a lot of really fun, exciting things that you use with the webinar setup where there are, we have a simultaneous translator listening in one language, speaking in another language, and you just pick the channel that you want to hear. It's really, really fast and cool. And that's something that I hadn't done in terms of conducting research until this past year. So in a lot of the ways that you can't replace being there and you can't replace understanding the culture, you can do research internationally and listen to the sessions in English. So I think that that's a good starting point of things that are just still not possible. And I'd love to hear more of the feedback and questions about that towards the end. So let's talk about some of the myths here, but I want to first start with this idea of methodological trade-offs. There's kind of these three areas of speed, cost, and rigor, or as one of my favorite PMs talked about, you can have it fast, cheap, or good. Two of the three, not all three. And if we're going to use methodology as a way of trading off between these things, it's this big myth about remote research that it's, well, something about each of these things. As a researcher, it's really important to know which trade-offs you're making and why, and to do those, make those decisions intentionally. So the first myth is remote research is faster. It can be. If you do an unmoderated study, it can be faster. But real time is still real time. And if you're conducting a session one-on-one, in-depth interview, if it's remote, yeah, you save some commute or travel time so because you're not both going to a lab somewhere. If there's inclement weather conditions, it makes it much easier to not have to go anywhere in the snow. And those pieces of it, those logistics can be easier and a little bit faster, but the study preparation is the same amount of time. Creating the screener, developing the methodology, the discussion guide, moderating the sessions, the analysis time, it all takes the same amount of time as it does to do an in-person study. The only difference is if you're doing a study in a different location than where you live, that could, add some additional time. And so in that sense, remote research can be faster, but a lot of the pieces of it are still the same amount of time. Remote research is cheaper. Can be. It can be less expensive if you have an access to a subscription to one of the online panels. I'm intentionally not naming any names because there are lots of panels out there. And as I'll talk about later, it's not about the tool, it's about the methodology. But you can have access to panels and thus have access to users, and it can be less expensive, but then you're limiting to that particular panel. Traditional recruitment methods, that's the same. In terms of gratuity, also the same. However, there might not be a parking reimbursement, which was the thing that we dealt with all the time. So it's nice to not have to deal with that particular piece of it. You do save on lab fees because you're not going to a physical location, but then you have tool or platform fees. So it kind of evens out. And remote research isn't as rigorous. This is my favorite one because there's a myth about remote research that it's just not as good. And actually, it takes as much effort and skill to do remote research as it takes to do in-person research. but it's all about doing good research. If you do research well, it's going to be good regardless of how you conduct it. And you can actually get a much higher N with an online study, especially if you're looking at a diary or survey or unmoderated panel. If N is important to you and you choose that that's important and you want that, it's much easier to get it online than it is to bring people into a specific lab location. We'll get into more about that later. Which brings me to the first truth. Your findings are only as good as your data collection methods. So when you're thinking about how do you plan research, how do you do it well, how do you think about your methodology? What matters is that you collect your data in the best way that you can. How do I collect good data, you might ask? I have a funnel and another framework. Maybe I call this the research planning funnel. So start at the top of the funnel and you're going to move down and you're going to get closer and closer to exactly what you choose to do. So start with the relationship of other research activities. What do you already know? What do other people already know? This is where lit reviews or internal lit reviews can come in. Where's your starting point? What place in the user-centered design process is this particular research falling? Are you looking for a strategic study, or are you looking for a concept study? Are you looking to iterate on a design, or are you at the evaluation tactical end of the scale? What are your specific goals for this study? What are these research questions? Then you start picking the methodology. How are you going to conduct this study? And then are you going to look at preference or sentiment and what people say? Or are you going to be more observational and behavioral and looking at what people do? Or is it going to be a mix? These should all be intentional questions that you're asking yourself, and thus how you decide that you're going to conduct your study and gather your data. And then your data type. Is it quant? Is it qual? Is it mixed? And does it align with the conclusions that you want to make? So when we're approaching research, it's really important to be objective when you design your study. You really want to start with your hypothesis and allow room to prove or disprove your hypothesis equally. Question your assumptions and constantly question your conclusions. Do I have the data to back this up? Does it make sense? How strongly do I believe that this is true? And then critically evaluate new findings. As new findings come in, assess whether or not those are things that you should accept or reject, and does it point towards accepting or rejecting your hypothesis? And when you have bad hypotheses or draw bad conclusions, drop them, because what matters is about building truth over time. And what's true right now will change over time too. So it is a moving target in a sense. Although over time you also develop a body of knowledge and understanding of your particular research area. So remote research, what is it? It's a tool. It's a tool that's in the toolbox of different types of research that we can have access to as researchers. And it doesn't work for everything, but it's pretty flexible. And I think that that's what we learned over this past year, is how many ways we can be flexible with it to make it work for what we need to do when we can't be in person. So I'd like to now shift towards adapting studies from an in-person setting to remote. Now, some in-person methodologies are easier to adapt than other ones. So for example, if you have an in-depth interview or some kind of concept study where it's mostly just video or a little bit of video plus, hey, look at this idea, tell me what you think about it. It's actually pretty simple. And we end up just using Zoom for a lot of things because that's what the data is. The data is the conversation. The data is the feedback on the thing. Or you can combine it with, here's a link to a survey from whatever survey platform you like to use. Longitudinal studies, great for remote research, because a lot of times, even when I did remote research studies at Microsoft, I would have a data collection over time in a diary and then visit people in person at the end. And the online tools, or even just email, depending on how you want to use your study, you can get as complex as you want or as simple as you want. And online tools are great for being able to collect that data over time. Homework assignments, another example. They do something on their own, then they submit it. This could be a text document that they write. It could be photos, it could be videos. Selfie videos are really fun. And then in terms of adaptations of usabilities, benchmarks, and co-creation, these get a little bit more difficult to adapt because you have to also manage the other tools, internet connections. If you have like if you're doing a usability study remotely and your internet connection like stops or the call like just doesn't go for a minute and you're like, oh, I missed all of that interaction. So that could be a little bit more difficult. And then at the far end of the scale, physical hardware evaluation is, well, extremely difficult if you're not there physically pushing buttons. So that's a piece that is much harder. But then again, you can also adapt the methodology to show a photo of it and you can have them imagine things. Again, it's not perfect, but there's a lot of good enough. And I think that's the eternal job of the researcher to balance out what's possible with what's enough versus this idea of perfection, which we're never going to attain. So let's go into some of the advantages, and I have 4 of them. So the first one is recruitment. This is by far, I think, one of the best pieces about remote research, and it's because you can find exactly who you want, regardless of their location. And if you're looking at trying to get a representative sample of a population, so for example, the USA, you're not going to find all of those people in one of the tech hubs like Seattle or San Francisco. You want to actually get people from all over the country. And so if you wanted to avoid tech bias, then you before would have to go to another location, but you're still getting people from only that location. And so with remote research, you can actually get people anywhere. And that's wonderful. And this is a thing that we really have a more representative sample when you get people from across the country and that are not necessarily in a single city or in a tech hub. It's also easier to get someone to commit to something if they don't have to leave their home. And well, when we're stuck at home in confinement, then doing something else outside of the norm is welcome sometimes too. Which leads us to another research truth. If you get bad users, you're gonna get bad data, which will then lead to bad conclusions you draw from that bad data and bad recommendations for what you do to your product. And this is bad research. So it's really important to start with getting the right people. And when you get the right people, they are your target audience for your product, then you're able to make the correct conclusions about what they care about, what's difficult for them, and then make those recommendations on what needs to be done. Because then you have the right people and you're able to do the research in such a way that you're going to actually meet their needs. So the second advantage is environment. And environment actually goes 2 ways. It's not just the environment of the study or the research participant, it's actually the environment of the researcher, where you actually live. And that could be, so in users of the study or your target users, you're seeing them where they actually live. You're seeing their actual commute. What if you were doing research and you wanted to follow them over a day? They can take pictures of themselves wherever they're at. You can call them from wherever they're at the time. You can do a lot of show and tell research, like give me a video tour of your home or give me a video tour of your commute from your bed to your desk. And it's really easy to gather those screenshots because they're already at home. And then you're going to also be looking at it from your own home. I'm going to throw out a controversial piece here. Can this reduce the Hawthorne effect? So the Hawthorne effect is this idea that individuals modify an aspect of their behavior in response to being observed. But on a Zoom call, there's an element of safeness to it that you're not actually physically here in my room with me. If I feel uncomfortable, I just have to close my laptop. And I feel like that gives a little bit of safety. So yes, it's important to still develop rapport, but it's also a digital barrier. And we have to see things in the user and their context through that digital divide. But at the same time, we're each in our spaces where we can feel comfortable. Another aspect of environment and remote research can give us empathy for remote working teams. And now that this is the norm, this is actually, I think, even more true. Because if you ever worked at the corporate office of the corporate headquarters of a company, especially a big company, like I worked at Microsoft in Bellevue, but I also worked at Microsoft in Redmond. And there's actually even a difference between there, because if we're in Bellevue, Redmond still felt like it was the place where all the things were happening. Of course, it's not exactly true, but there's a perception that perceived distance. Being in Bellevue could be the same as being in San Francisco or LA, as far as I was concerned. I was getting on a video call with people that lived across the city. But what if you're looking at how teams are working outside of the corporate office, the corporate headquarters? You start to develop a lot more empathy for researching and understanding how people react to time zone differences. And I have to say, working in France with a team based in the USA, that affects me as well in a very different way. Like my whole rhythm is different and my whole life is different because I have chosen to work in such a way that this is possible, but that's amazing. And as a researcher, you're actually able to work in a place which is conducive to deep work. And I added a link here to a book by Cal Newport, which is a very, very good read if you haven't read it before. But it's this idea that doing deep work is the thing that will get you promoted as opposed to the thing that doesn't keep you from, or that doesn't get you fired. And deep work is the cognitively challenging work that we do that moves the needle, that makes a difference. And I believe that doing research is deep work because we are developing ideas, we're synthesizing data, we're coming up with new ideas, we're designing new ways of approaching things. And deep work in this sense is actually really important. And the location that you as a researcher is really important as well, because you're in your space. This is my comfortable space, and I can arrange my life and conduct research in a way that allows me to do that work. Computer-mediated communication creates a distance between us, but what if we can use it to our advantage to help users feel comfortable opening up? This is the question I want to pose. So I have a couple little slides here and there throughout on tips and advice on developing rapport, specifically for remote research. Because people can be wary and they don't necessarily know if you're a real person or not, show them that you're a real person. And again, this is all has to do with your comfort level as well, which is very important here. But if you are, share your real phone number, your LinkedIn profile, your real email address or your work email address. It's really important to prove that you're real. When you're starting to make that little bit of chit chat, which is important, and this is a really important difference between in-person research and remote research. Typically, if I was doing that little bit of chit chat with the participants, asking them how their day was, about some kind of news cultural event or season, or oh, it's really rainy, isn't that awful in Seattle? That happens when you go to the waiting room and pick the person up and walk them to the lab. But all of that is happening online now. And so a lot of times it's important to extend the amount of time that you think it's going to happen, just to have that additional time to make sure that your participants are feeling comfortable. Because you do still have to get to that place where they feel comfortable telling you what they really think. Of course, avoiding controversial topics, still a good plan. And then really being genuine. I think that's really, really important to show that you care. And laughter is a good way to humanize each other. And again, this is very easy in COVID times because a lot of people have things that happen unexpectedly. They're like, oh, how do I do this? Children running by screaming. Lots of things have happened. Thank you to the internet memes for all of the wonderful things that have been shared. And that humanizes us. And it makes us feel more connected. So time is the third advantage, and time is really important. And it can actually be used to your advantage because you can plan the research on the participants' time. It's not that they have to be at the lab at this place in this certain location at this particular time. It's really much easier for them to be flexible to work with a time that works for them. There isn't a commute time for either of you, and that makes when you're doing a live session much easier And then additionally, you can use time zones to your advantage when you're looking at across the country or even across the world. And you start to learn like the, the time zone conversions. Like I know that 9 hours is the France or Central Europe conversion to the USA. Studies can also take less time to conduct. Especially if you could be really targeted in your scoping. It could be really another way, because again, nobody wants to be on a Zoom call for 2 hours. So if you hone it down into just the essential, it can take less time. And then when you have a recording of a session, it can be consumed at a later time as well. So time is actually an element here that can be used to your advantage. And if you're on the product team watching a session happen, is it that important that you experience it exactly the same time? Or what if you could watch that same session the next day? You can still take notes, you can still learn from what's going on, and you can still come up with your own conclusions. And that's really important. It's more important to be able to consume the data and really understand where the users are coming from than it is to be there exactly at that specific time. And the last advantage is methodology. And there are a lot of methodological options that you can have. And remote research can be used very well in a lot of these. There's one that I'll call the tip of the iceberg. I think that remote research is great especially if you're using one of the online panels and you just want to throw out a couple questions to just get some ideas flowing, see what people tend to think about a certain topic. That'll help you learn just a little bit so that then you can plan a deeper study into a piece of that. I think that that's can be really, really beneficial. Very simple questions. If you start small and learn more as you go, I think about research more and more in terms of a progression of studies than any one single study that becomes the definitive, because there is no definitive example. And that you learn over time and then you grow your body of knowledge about what your users care about and what matters in terms of the solution that we design for them. Iterative studies in the user-centered design process. It's great to be able to plan a series of studies and then go back, iterate, and then test again. You can totally do this with remote research. Mixed studies as well, mixed method studies. Very simple to do them sequentially or at the same time and then learn from a lot of things. I like to do them sequentially though. This idea of phased research is really what I'm talking about here, that research doesn't exist in a vacuum and that it's always building upon your own body of knowledge on your product and about your users. And studies can be aware of each other and aware of other research that's going on because you're getting a broader and more comprehensive view of your users and your product. I have to throw in this quote from Thomas Kuhn here from The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, because this really gets to the heart of it. Its assimilation requires the construction of prior theory and reevaluation of prior fact, an intrinsically revolutionary process that is seldom completed by a single man and never overnight. We're always adding to what we know, and we're building on what we learned before, and we're reconfirming it, and we're rejecting pieces of it that don't work, and only accepting the ones that make a lot of sense. I actually want to stop here. I have a couple of slides on, we'll call it kind of general research advice, but I'm going to let you consume those at home. And I think now might be a good time to start opening up to questions.
We had one early on asking your advice on how to deal with off-task participants or participants who are usually really quiet.
Yeah, those are all still things that we deal with, and I think that it's the same techniques that you would use as you were in person. So off-topic participants are fun. I think that it depends on how related the off-topicness is and if it's getting you closer. Because if you're starting at the beginning of your study and you're looking and you're really scoping it broadly, like how do you do this particular activity? I'll use email because I used to work at Outlook. Tell me about how you communicate with your friends and family. That's pretty broad. We're not even talking about email yet. And then they start talking about this app that we've never heard of. Wow, that's really interesting and relevant. Let's talk about that. Whereas if it's closer towards the, once you've scoped down into like, this is the thing that we're really talking about that we really want to get to, and then they just start talking about something completely unrelated, like, hey, this is really fascinating. Thanks for sharing this. Say whatever it is that is true for you, because that's what's more important. We only have a little bit of time, so I want to make sure that we can get through all of the things that I have prepared for us. Quiet participants, still hard. Yeah, just ask them lots of questions. Tell them silence is another good trick because people don't like being quiet. And when you just be quiet and smile, they like to fill that space. And if they don't, tell me what you're thinking right now. Or tell me more about what you just said here. These are good ways to get those people to talk. If they still don't talk, like, I mean, there are just people that don't like to talk very much, that are very, difficult participants. Like sometimes you just have to end the study early. I don't know if that answered the question. You can type into the, I can see the chat now. Type into the question if there's any follow-up there.
Are there some specific probes, just to follow up on that question, are there specific probes that you recommend using in these kind of situations when participants are really quiet and like you have tried few things and it still doesn't work?
I mean, when I try a few things, it usually eventually works, or they just don't have a lot to say about the topic. And so it could be one of those two things. So there's, tell me more about what you're thinking right now. I saw you were just looking at this. Tell me what stands out to you, or bringing up a topic from earlier. But if they really just have nothing to say, that's data too. Like maybe they don't care about what we're talking about and they just don't have anything to say. If they don't have anything to say because they don't care, it's not really that important for me to gather that data.
Yeah, that's a good point. So next question is about other methods beside remote interviews on Zoom. Do you suggest, like what methods do you suggest as alternatives for remote research besides Zoom?
I mean, you can do them on any platform. I want to understand more of that question, because you can use any platform to do a remote interview. But then there are also other platforms where you can do remote moderated or unmoderated usability testing.
Yeah, I guess the question might be more about methods other than remote interviews itself and not specifically about the platform. So
concept studies, diary studies, cognitive walkthroughs, usability studies, benchmark studies, like everything can be done online. Some of them, there's a slide I had earlier about some of the ones that are harder to adapt online. Like if you're doing like a physical hardware usability, like that's kind of hard because you have to actually be there to touch it and interact with it. But then you just change it into a cognitive walkthrough. So, I mean, you can do all of the same stuff.
Our next question is, are there any specific tools and techniques you would recommend for remoted, unmoderated interviews? Thinking on what would be most human-friendly experience for participants?
Remote, unmoderated interviews?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that when it comes to remote, unmoderated interviews, what really matters is that you're thorough in your questions and you've thought through all of the probes in advance. Because again, there are a lot of tools out there that can do this. It's really about how you plan your study and make sure that you're very clear in your questions and that you have follow-up probes built in. So maybe you say like, have people rate something on a Likert scale, and then afterwards follow up with, and tell me why you rated this how you did. And that response can be a textual response, or it could even be a video response. But I think that what matters is that you're building into the process the way to collect the data that you need that answers your research question.
Could you say more about the politics of choosing participants? Participant asked, I often found the product team had their ideas about who they wanted, not always leading to the best science.
Well, they're called hypotheses, and we treat every study and every potential type of user as are they the right user or not? And I think that it really depends on what the goal of the study is. So if the goal is to define who that target audience is, then yeah, you can start with whoever we collectively as a team think are those people. If we have no idea, then you can start gathering some data and seeing like where it really resonates, who has this problem, let's find out more about that problem, and then you eventually hone into these are your target users. But I think you should always, yeah, start off with as many hypotheses as to target user groups as you can. And then as you conduct more research, you start eliminating some of those people. And then you also sometimes expand on some of them and go deeper into it as well. What about manage the product team to convince them about the best? Yeah, data speaks to the product team in terms of convincing them. But I think that it's what matters is if we're doing research to understand who the users are, that is the goal of the research. And the goal is learning about these types of behaviors of people that are important. And that as we are communicating more about what we learned about these people to the product team, we're starting to develop the empathy for who these people are, what their delights and pain points are, and what are the most important pain points that we need to solve. And then we start iterating on trying to design solutions to those problems.
And a related question on the stakeholders is, what are your tips or best practices for getting your stakeholders involved with remote research?
I mean, if they, well, there's a multi-pronged, like there are lots of potential issues. If they're not involved and you want them to be, but they don't want to be, it's really hard to kind of force someone to be involved. But at the same time, I found the opposite is usually true. I found that a lot of times people are really wanting to be involved, but don't know how. And so when it comes to involving them, like remote research is very easy to involve people in because you sign into the live session or you sign into the tool and consume the data. And you're learning with the rest of us at the same time that we are. And then we have a discussion afterwards. Debrief, right? What did you learn? What are some of the things that really stood out to you? And I think that that's really important in terms of getting the product team involved because people will see different things based on their own discipline. So an engineer will see a different problem than a designer will see. And that's really important because every perspective that we add to it is actually going to increase our understanding of what matters to those people.
Can you elaborate on how to design and implement a longitudinal study? Example, do you intermittent surveys replace users having their own diary document or something else?
I mean, you could do it either way. It really depends on, just keep saying this, it depends on your study goals and how you want to design your study. If you want to use intermittent surveys, you can do that. If you want to have a more formal diary where they come in every day and log their experiences using your product, you can do that too. You can do this competitively. A lot of times I've done studies where we take a week to just measure current behaviors, and there can be some feedback surveys, or you build a survey into your diary platform tool, whichever one it is. And then you give them a new experience for week 2, and you say, here's a new thing, try this app instead of this other app that you've been using. And you do some other research, maybe a first impression survey, or you have them record a short video walking through the experience for the first time. So you're really capturing that first experience. And then afterwards, you see how they progress over the course of the week. What did they learn? What has been difficult for them? Is there anything they couldn't do over the course of the week? And then during week 3, you can say, okay, you can use that previous tool you were using. You can use this new tool. Just tell me what you've been doing. And again, you can document it in a diary format where every day they log their experiences, or you could just do some surveys. I like to do a mix of them. And then in terms of finishing out a longitudinal study, I like to end with remote interviews, because that really helps to solidify, both for you and for the participants, what their experiences was like. And it gives them the context to look through the past 2 or 3 weeks to say, this is what really could have been better about this experience, but this is what I like about it, and this is what I want to continue using. Hopefully that answered the question.
So another attendee asked, said, I previously did a lot of ethnography and contextual inquiry. You mentioned getting folks to video their daily task as a potential replacement.
Yeah.
How do you avoid their own curation and see the little things that they don't think to show?
I mean, you can't. They are curating their experience for you. Like, I think little things like if you are with them live and they are connected on their phone or their laptop and they give you a tour of their home while you're there, where it's relevant, then you're able to capture some more of those things, and you just ask them to go slowly so that you can see everything well, or give them a tour. Another aspect could be if you are having them, like for example, we've actually done this using like remote like chatting apps, like chatting phone apps, where you can just ping them at any like random time and be like, oh, hey, what are you doing right now? And then they like take a selfie photo or something like that. Again, it all comes back to the research question. And I think that replicating the ethnographic experience is really not possible. We can get close to it and we can try some workarounds. The most ethnographic way that we can really collect this data, I think, is the combination of some sort of diary plus interview, because what we really want is to have experiences happen and then capture those experiences as they're happening. And that's not always possible, even in a lab study or in a remote interview, because it's going to happen whenever it happens. And it's really about the artifact and collecting that artifact and using it as a discussion piece. What happened here? How could this particular example have been better? And when you're balancing out the diary plus the remote interview, you're able to much better get a sense of those two, because you have the thing that happened when it happened normally, and then you have let's have a discussion about that thing.
So you mentioned that sometimes you ping people at a random time and ask them to send you like a snapshot.
That is a thing that someone can do, yes.
So how do you make sure, like, how can we make sure that people are comfortable with that, or how can we make people like comfortable with that idea?
Build it into the screener. This is what's going to be happening. Are you okay with this? Like it all gets built into the screener, because I think that people have to have a good sense of what they're signing up for. And typically when we're looking at diaries, it's measured by amount of time that they're going to spend with whatever thing it is per day. So we're actually giving them a gratuity for each chunk of the day that they are doing something as it's related to the study. And if it's going to be intense, we kind of say, hey, look, this is going to be a lot of work. We're also going to pay you for a lot of that work too. Like, so they should balance each other out. And if you're getting a lot of drop-offs, it's probably because you're asking too much and paying them too little. But we found that whenever we have the right balance of that.
So on the gratuity, another question is, what about paying folks to participate in your research study? Is it common practice to pay with money or swag? At what point do you decide to do this?
Again, it really depends on your particular company, and it also depends on your users, because your target users may not be able to accept money. Like if you're working with, like if your target users are government employees, for example, you can't just give them money or can't give them like X amount of money. So it's really important to understand what your target users can accept, as well as what you will be paying. And I think that it really depends. Like the more flexible the payment is, the easier it is to kind of convince people to do that. If you're giving them cash, like, oh yeah, they're definitely gonna be like, yep, I will do this. Cash is the easiest one. But then you can also give like gift cards and things like that. Those are other options.
So another question is around one of your slide. An early slide said you can increase your N. What is N in this context? Is it the sample size, total population?
Yeah, number of participants in your study, your sample for your study. So if you're doing a usability study and it's remote and unmoderated, if you're doing a normal usability study and you're moderating them live, you might want to do like, I don't know, 10 people. But if you're doing it remote and unmoderated, you can easily get 20 in the same amount of time, because it's very, very quick on the remote unmoderated piece of it. But again, it depends on how much depth you want. If you want to have the depth of the back and forth conversation with the person while you're watching them as they're doing it and then discussing what just happened, you're going to want to do that in real time. But that's real time. It doesn't like get faster because the time is the time that it is. Whereas if you're doing it in a remote unmoderated way, then you can get more of it, but you lose that ability to follow up and be like, oh, hey, when this happened, what were you thinking here? You kind of lose that, but you can up the N, and then you have like a sample of 20 as opposed to a sample of 10.
Hey, Josh, this is for you again. While we still have everyone here, I'm wondering if you can maybe just give some general thoughts to people who maybe are sitting at their desk right now looking at your slides thinking, yes, this is what I want to do. I'm ready to quit. I'm ready to pick up my things and move to a different country and conduct remote research. Just kind of some general experience, maybe some things people are not considering.
I don't think that I understood your question. Can you ask that again?
Oh, yeah, sorry, maybe I just rambled. Just general advice about your experience about, moving to a different country and starting to conduct remote research on your own type of thing.
Well, those are. How much time do we have? This is like the hold my beer moment. Let me just tell you about.
Sure. I mean, if you just wanted to give us some tidbits of knowledge. In the meantime, people feel free to add more questions.
Yeah, I mean, I think that moving to a new country, especially where you don't speak the language, like when I moved here, I spoke some French, but not really well. And it's a really humbling experience, and it gives a lot of empathy for people that have moved to the US and speak English as a second language. And there are a lot of people. And it gives you a new sense of empathy for what that experience is like, because you don't really know. Like I grew up in California. I'm from the USA. I went to school and grad school in California and Washington. It's very easy to feel like you have the sense of what the world is through the American lens. And the more that I've done international research, the more I appreciate the differences. I also see more of the similarities, which I find beautiful. And I appreciate the differences as well. And I think that the experience of moving to another country, like even France, it's Western Europe, but it's completely different. I feel like it's in some ways more similar to the US, and in other ways, it's not very similar at all. And people just approach things in a different way. Even in the language, you say things in a completely different way. And it's confusing to wrap your head around. And then at the same time, it allows you to appreciate the world with so much more depth and richness. And that's why I love international research, because I think that just thinking about things from a new perspective allows you to really understand that the world is much more interesting and nuanced than it is before when you're just coming from a singular perspective.
Awesome. Yeah, that was great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Well, we still have Josh here. Everyone, please don't be shy. Ask your questions.
I'll put into the chat. I'm happy to send out my slides. And if you are interested, I have, let me just get this right. If you're interested in hearing from me with additional research topics, articles and stuff, you can actually subscribe to our mailing list. I'll put that link here, and I will send out the slides to anyone that does that. And if anyone does not want to, that's also fine. And you can email the HCDE Alumni Board and they will also have access to them. Oh, Aaron Meyer's book. Yeah, so this came up in a panel that I was on last week on international research and culture. And there's this book called The Culture Map that Melissa just added to the chat here. We've actually had every single employee in our company read this book, and we discussed it over, I think, 3 or 4 book discussions, because it gives a framework for how to approach how different cultures perceive things differently. Time is a really good example. There's cultural nuances around what is appropriate for being on time. Is it a few minutes late? Is it a lot late? And is it like you have to be early? And every culture has a different sense of time. So that's just one of them. Awesome.
I don't see any more questions. So, oh, we do have one more.
Ooh, keep them coming in.
Do you have any tips for recruiting traditionally an underrepresented population for remote research? For example, what channels of recruitment to use, what kind of language to use, sensitivity, etc.?
It definitely depends on the underrepresented population that you're looking for. So definitely be aware of that. It also, and since we're kind of talking about international research too, the international laws are different for each country as well as to what kinds of things you can screen for and what kinds of things you can't screen for. So I would definitely, like in the case where you really want to find like a really specific group or underrepresented population or marginalized population, I think it's really important to really just be sensitive to the language that you use, number one, to work with a recruiter that is specialized in that if possible. Like a lot of accessibility research, for example, is a good example of that, where you really want to make sure that, oh, I will, Dominic, I will talk about that in a second. You really want to make sure that you're asking questions in the right way. And so your recruitment partner will be able to help you adjust your language to make sure that you're not unnecessarily causing harm when you don't mean to. And it's really important to just ask people, and I'll bring in the accessibility piece of this too. It's important to just ask people, what is the best way to interact with you? How can I, what manner can I interact with you? And I think that that's what's really important, because you want to meet your users on their terms, not force them to come to where you are. And sometimes you might have to also be really crafty, really like especially creative in your recruitment methods. If you're looking for like especially difficult types of people, like maybe sex workers would be an example. It's really important to approach them in the right way, especially depending on the legality of that type of situation. Like we have one researcher who focused on research with sex workers in her home country in Africa. And so it's really, really important to ask those questions the right way, but also to develop the trust with that other person that you're not going to exploit them or you're not going to cause any harm to them. And I think that that's really the key when you're working with underrepresented populations. I hope that addressed the questions there.
We have another question. Of the comments about the Hawthorne effect. Back in my day, we had to set up video cameras and they were very obtrusive and people were self-conscious about being recorded. The forced use of Zoom and highly unobtrusive webcam has undoubtedly dulled people to being on camera. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. I think that the impact on the world around you and the level of that impact is definitely something that makes a difference. Like my computer, like I don't have anything else going on, but like I can see my video is still on, right? But I forget about that it's there, except for the fact that I'm the only person on it right now. But like when there's a big group of people, like I forget that it's on because, and apparently a lot of people forget that their video cameras are on when they're doing things on Zoom calls.
So compared to before all of the COVID situation, if you used to conduct, when you used to conduct remote research compared to that time versus now, do you find people being more comfortable with cameras, being in front of the camera, or just recruit?
Yeah.
Find it easier to recruit people to be in these kind of situations?
Yeah, I think, like I said earlier, I think that collectively as a culture and even internationally as well, we're kind of forced to be okay with it. And I think that people are becoming more okay with it as well. If they're not okay with it, they don't get through the screener and we don't recruit them for our study. So I think that it's also like, there could be aspects of self-selectiveness to it. But I think that, I mean, we're always going to be recording a session for doing research and people just have to be okay with that regardless.
We have one question in the chat. What is the motivating dollar pay range for moderated remote sessions in your experience, say typically for a 60-minute session?
It depends on your target user because certain groups are going to be more expensive than other ones. And it also depends on the nature of your study and the, I don't know, the difficulty or invasiveness of what it is that you're going to be doing. Sometimes topically, you might want to compensate people more if you're going to be intentionally talking about difficult subjects as opposed to just a online usability study of a retail site that maybe is more innocuous. So it really depends. And if you're going for like high-end, like IT decision makers, like, or IT pros, like these people are really expensive because an hour of their time has to be more than they're making during their normal day. And so it really depends on your users. And again, this is the kind of thing that depending on the type of study and the product that we're working on, it's going to be different. It's also different for every country as well. And what's motivating in one country is not going to be the same because of exchange rates in another country. So this is where like it's important to work with a good recruiter to help advise on like where, because they actually track all of this. Like they'll track their show rates and they'll know what kind of study it was and how long it was and what the gratuity was. So it's a thing that's really important to track, and then you kind of know like, hey, if we want to do this amount of time, like we're not going to go under this amount. And I think that when and like I said before, like if you are getting drop-offs in your diary study that's 3 weeks long and you're paying them like $100, like that's probably why. It's because you need to pay them more, and then tie the outcomes to specific dollar amounts. If you do this, we will give you this much money. If you finish all of the tasks in the diary, we will give you this much money. If you're selected for the one-on-one interview, you will get this additional amount of money. And so you kind of like let them choose their involvement with the expectation that they're going to go through the whole thing. Of course, things happen to everybody. And that's just a reality. So you over recruit that from what you really want in order to make sure that, like, with some dropout rates, which always happens, that you're still getting mostly completes. It's not an easy question. Alan, you can send me a message and we could talk about it more if you're really interested.
I see we have a couple of more questions. Do you ever run into a situation where concerns with confidentiality, like other people hearing an online discussion, screenshot, etc., prevents you from taking a remote approach to a research need? How do you draw that line?
Yeah, so I think that in the cases of you're worried about someone taking a screenshot, then you shouldn't be doing that research online, or you shouldn't be doing it in such a way that people can take that screenshot. And I've worked on a lot of top secret products at Microsoft before they were released. And sometimes they were so top secret that we couldn't even tell or talk about what we did with other people in the company. It could only be people on the exact team that we're on. So in that case, you only want to share information with people that have access to that information. Another way to approach that would be to look at what is a complementary way of looking at the same thing, but on currently released devices or apps or websites. So you're looking at how do you do this thing that's already available that you've already been using in order to gain insights from how people might be doing something similar in a different context or in a different app or website or device. So I think that in those cases, you can gather both types of information at the same time and put it together. In terms of overhearing things, I mean, that's actually not something I've ever heard of as being a concern, but I think that it really depends on the type of discussion that you're having. So if you're having a discussion with somebody that's underage, for example, you have to get consent from their parent in order to participate in the study. You also have to say, these are the things that we're going to be talking about in this study. Is that going to be okay? And so everyone is going to like feel like it's a safe space to be able to talk about those types of things. And depending on the sensitivity of the topic, yeah, like there might be times that people don't want to share things. And it's really important to give them the opportunity to not feel like they have to share something that they don't feel comfortable sharing. Typically, this is something that we work into the beginning of any type of interview or usability study or whatever it is, where we say, hey, we're going to be recording this thing that's on your phone. If there's ever a time where you want to pick up your phone and do whatever you need to do and then put it back, that's totally fine. And the reality is that they're probably equally as embarrassed as we are seeing something inappropriate on somebody else's phone. Like, it's not the point of the study. The point is like to learn about what they're doing, what they care about, not about like some unnecessary disclosure of something that we didn't need to know. Like, we don't want to know those things either, and we should all feel comfortable about doing it. Another aspect of the sensitivity topic is potentially looking at gender and making sure that if you are doing a study on women's health issues, that you have a woman researcher that's actually moderating those sessions, because I don't want to hear about women's issues any more than a woman probably wants to tell me about them either. And I think it's probably vice versa, because those are, you know, difficult topics. Or if you're looking at depression or things like that, and you're working with teens and you have a study on teens and depression, like, it's like, this is a really, you know, be careful moment, because you at the same time have an ethical responsibility to report any kinds of behavior that could lead to self-harm. And again, this is the kind of thing that you build into the beginning of your study. We're going to be talking about some difficult topics. If there's ever something that makes you feel uncomfortable, please just let me know and we'll move on. I went off on a little tangent there, but hopefully that was helpful.
Is dropout rate different now with remote, higher or lower? What is usual?
It depends. So, okay, dropout rate on a diary study, like, it's typically there. And it depends on, again, that's why we kind of like incentivize people at a higher rate, because it actually incentivizes them to complete it. So it's not been as much of an issue for my studies, but I know that overall there is a higher dropout rate. I always come back to this idea of like, I'm paying you for your time, and your time should be, I should be paying you more than you think your time is valuable for, or at least compensate it in an equal way. A lot of times people just want to be a part of the research because they enjoy the process of participating in the research. But yeah, things happen. And I think a lot of things happen to a lot of us, especially people with children. It makes it very difficult if you have children at home and you're supposed to also be somewhere else, like working or taking part in the study. So there's a lot of extra flexibility that needs to happen. And an interesting like little tidbit though, is that a lot of times people will ask for a reschedule. And I think that like 98% of the time we reschedule the session and then they like don't show up to the second one either. So if they are like wishy-washy about it or don't feel committed, or they just aren't like on top of like confirming, and then they like cancel but ask for a reschedule, you probably just want to cancel them and then like have a backup participant.
I think we lost Josh.
Oh, I'm still here. Hello?
Oh, okay.
Yay, technology.
I'm sorry, it must be mine. Yeah. Can you elaborate on starting small? I'm involved in the redesign of a complex page on a complex web app. That's a nice question.
Yeah, I mean, if you're working on something complex, the best thing to do is start. Definitely, yeah, just start, just learn something. I think that it's really easy to overcomplicate things very quickly. And if you literally have no idea what a problem is, just start with like, if you know who the audience is, talk to those people. And I would just do like a semi-structured interview around what they're currently doing, their delights in what they're doing, what's working really well for them, and where they really see the breakdowns and what those pain points are, and then talk about how those pain points can be solved. That's going to be a great start. Again, this is assuming you have the target users already. Like if you have an app and you know who your target users are, or you're working on an internal tool and you know exactly who your users are, like these are great places to start. And just the more that you talk to people, the more that you're going to start seeing those patterns. And I think that the important piece is to start with something broad enough that you're going to capture all of the things that you don't know, and yet also focused enough that you're going to learn what you need in order to take the next step. And I think that as long as you can see what that next step looks like, the step after that's also going to become apparent once you do more. I'm just reading the chat here. We know the page is overwhelming to consume. I don't know if we can strip content and the user isn't the only one invested in the content. This is the question you're answering. Okay. Yeah, I mean, if it's overwhelming, then like, let's figure out what about it is overwhelming. It's probably because the page is competing, I'm just gonna guess, competing for your attention with different things. So I think that the strategy would be to really look at the scenarios that are most important for each type of user. So if you have multiple users and your page is trying to appeal to all of them, maybe this is a case where you understand each user's needs individually and then allow an experience for the most important things to be surfaced at the right time that help those users with their important scenarios. But again, it's hard to know just from the question, but I hear you on the overwhelming side of things. I know that happens a lot with web pages where you just want to like over time, more gets added to them. And I've worked on these pages as well. And then it's really hard to say like, oh no, we have to take this off, but because there's a team that builds this thing, so they don't want to take this thing off even though nobody uses it. Or maybe a lot of people use it, but everyone hates it. We've seen all of these things. Yes, Dominic, yes. Sounds like the page owners are competing to get on that page. Yeah, information architecture is a great one.
I see one last question. Much of the discussion here today has been on methods and approach, but your emphasis is very human focused.
Yeah.
It's so important. Thanks. Anything more you want to say about that?
Yeah, I think that it's really easy to get stuck in what tool should I use? Like, how do I use this method? Or like, there's not this like magic bullet of research that's like, if you just use X tool. And I've intentionally not mentioned, I said Zoom a few times because we're on a Zoom call and it's like the new standard, but like basically any other tool can work. You can do a video call on Google Meet. You can do a video call on Teams. The tool doesn't matter. And it's so easy to get caught up in, I have to do all these things or do this method in exactly this way. And it's really about understanding who's using your product and making your product better. And you can go down the rabbit hole of methodology, which is fun. And I'm like signed up to do that because it's super fun. And at the same time, if the user gets lost in that, then you're not really doing anything. You're just being busy or learning some interesting things, but it always has to come back to solving a problem that a user has. There's actually a slide in here, and I put it in the, thank you, Dominic. I put it in the appendix, but I have this this framework of like target user or audience, problem, solution. And when you look at it in terms of that, the most important thing is understand who your audience is, what problems they have, and then design solutions that address their problems. The problem with every single tech company is that we start with the problem or the solution in mind, and then we go back and reverse engineer the user and the problem to fit our ingenious solution. And then we have a whole bunch of products that people don't use because we build things thinking that people are going to use them when they address problems that people don't have. So we just have to stop doing that. And this is the role of research. This is the role of UX. This is the role of design. This is the role of cultural design and ethical design. It's about coming back to the user, and it's about understanding what matters to them, not what matters to me, not what matters to the design team or the engineering team or the PM team. It's what matters to the user. And as soon as you put the user in the center of your focus, everything will flow out of that.
Love that answer. Starting from the user and the problem rather than the solution. So I think we are almost at time. One last call for any more questions. Now is the time before we say bye to Josh for today. We will also share the slides and a recording of the talk later in an email to all of you. And I will link to Josh's profile as well. So you guys can also connect with him directly as well if you guys want to discuss on any topic later on with him.
Yeah, I'll put my LinkedIn in the chat too.
Oh, one more question.
Yay.
What forum is out there that acts like a mentor for us researchers who are alone and lonely?
Well, there's a few forums that I'm a part of. There's the User Research Collective on Facebook. That's a Facebook group that is really active. There's also the Design User Research Group, Google group, that's pretty active as well. And then there's a Market Research Pro group that I just joined recently as well. But I think that it's important to find your peeps and connect with them and ask them questions and ideas. There's also, I blog a lot on Medium, and there's a really good design and research blog that I think it has a lot of really good content. Let me get that too. That one's mine. The UX Collective is the name of it. So I think that's another good place to get ideas and insights.
Yeah, and we can also link to all of these resources in the email that we will send out later on. So you guys will all have access to all the resources that Josh is just talking about.
Yeah. Thank you all for the really good questions. I think it's actually a good sign that what we're really talking about is research and doing research well. And yeah, this element of remote research, but the goal is not be an expert in remote research. The goal is understand your customers. And I think that that's really come out in this discussion as well. So I thank you all for the good questions and the discussion here, because it's been really, really fascinating to think through and to share. And thanks for listening too.
Yeah, thank you for all the great insights. What a fun session.
Awesome.
I think I don't see any more questions. So it might be a good time to wrap up now, Josh.
Okay, great.
Thank you so
I'm
much,
here
everyone.
If you need me. Yes, thank you. I'm here if you need me. I can stay on a couple of minutes also if anyone has any additional questions, and go out and do research well, be it online or in person. Ta-da! That was it. That's the end. Thank you all.
Thank you for joining us, everyone, today. And if you'd like to see more of similar events, do send us an email at hcdealb@gmail.com, or follow our newsletter, subscribe to it. We organize these events every couple of months, and we also share other UX related resources in our newsletter. So get in touch with us.
All right, well, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your week. Thanks again, Josh.
Great. Thank you all very much.